Men of Reddit who proposed, and she said no. What happened afterwards with your life? She said yes on the second proposal and now we are divorced. Edit. Reddit is such a weird place. All the carefully thought out posts and comments get zero recognition, and then this random off the cuff remark is my most liked comment. Glad you all got a kick out of it. For those wondering, I've been single for a year. I spent last night with a smart beautiful woman and had a blast. Life is good. After reading all these stories, I laughed when I read this. Not at your misfortune, but at how succinct it was. We were living together. I asked. She said no. I love you, but I need to think about it. I don't think I'm ready yet. Can you give me some time and ask later? A few months go by. I ask again. Same response. A few more months. Same deal. A couple more weeks, and then she says, hey, what do you think of us getting married? I replied, that's an excellent idea. Why didn't I think of that? Our 39th anniversary is next month. I was expecting the story to get worse and worse, but it ended up better. Congrats. She had said she wasn't really a fan of marriage, so I thought proposing non-marriage might be well received, and I wanted us to be together for the rest of our lives. So I asked her not to marry me. She said no. We have been married for 10 years. Pulled the old reverse card on her. Dated a woman for over 2 years and popped the question. First time she said I don't know. A couple months later I asked her again. She said maybe. I was pretty bent out of shape. But then I found out she was sleeping with several of my friends. So I dodged a bullet there really. Damn dude, I'm sorry about your friends. Genuine shiz bags of people to knowingly sleep with your girl. I hope you find better friends. We lived together for another 6 years until she changed her mind and told me that I should ask again. We were engaged for over a year and got married in 1991. We are still married, have 3 children, and are both still very much in love. Why the initial no? It was really bad for a while. Then it was really bad. Then it became really bad. Then it became bad. Then it was just blah. Then it was neutral. Then things started to get better. They continued to get better by me learning to be happy and me doing me things. I eventually found someone else, and things have been getting better for 20 years now. AHH. Love, life and time. Great synopsis. I asked her right out of high school, but she wasn't ready. We stayed together, went to college at the same school, spent the first year in separate dorms, then moved in together. Got married a few years later. Our 20th is coming up. What a wholesome story, /literal fisses. She said yes as I had a special occasion planned, one of those observation wheels, and I proposed at the very top and we were in our way to a family event, and I had a ring made and everything. Then a few days later she said no. Everything fell apart. I was distraught. We continued dating for a while, but it was long distance, other side of the world. When I visited it would be super awkward. Eventually he dad kicked me out, was flying standby, and was stuck in an airport for 4 days. Took me years to recover. Now I'm happily married, and I'm glad it never worked out. I was not in a good place when I met her, and her family was super controlling. It would never have worked. The woman I married is super cool and is my best friend. Turned out better than expected. Damn, that's messed up. She had cancer. I said we should get married because I had full medical coverage from my work. She said no, and over time we grew apart. Haven't talked to her in 15 years. Don't know if she died. I know a couple who did just that. He proposed in order to give her citizenship and health insurance so she could remain here and get cancer treatment she desperately needed. They stayed married for about 15 years and he even adopted her son, but they never lived together or were romantically involved. Years later, they divorced when he met the woman of his dreams and wanted to get married. They are all very close friends, with no drama. She lived and is a university professor now. He is in another state with the woman of his dreams. My mother turned my father down, but didn't outright break up with him. She just wasn't sure about the marriage idea. She valued her independence and was nervous about commitment. No hard feelings, though. He called up the next day when she'd had more time to think about it, and she said yes after all. They celebrated 32 years of marriage last month. Just the fact that they could say those things to each other and still be respectful and friendly, loving, that's the key there. Very first girlfriend ever. Started dating at 17. After 6 years of dating I proposed. She said no, I'm sorry. I asked why. She said, I've been thinking about this for a while, but didn't talk to you about it. I found someone else. Then she broke up with me right then and there. I asked if she cheated, and she said no. We are just friends right now. But he makes me happy when I'm with him and you just don't. You used to, but not anymore. I tried sabotaging their relationship when I found him begging her for nudes, tattled to her ultra-Christian parents that he was twice her age, which he is, and did everything I could to be the insane one. Finally realized what I was doing, apologized, promised to never talk to her or her family ever again. I sold the ring and used the money to buy a guitar and a boatload of weed and spiraled out of control for 3 years. Flunked all my cleas, got a dead-end job at a construction gig, slowly descended into borderline alcoholism. Couldn't leave the house, or go to work, or do my job without being high. Gained a ton of weight, let myself go. Finally contemplated suicide, planned it out with a 20-page instruction manual on how to make it painless, not screw it up, and not hurt anyone in the process. Never went through with it because I kept getting scared and spending my suicide fund on weed and alcohol. Finally broke down and told my parents all of this. Asked for help. Spent another year in a rehab program with a therapist. Got out and have been clean for 3 years by this September and still wake up at 3 AM feeling sick every couple of months for the way I treated her after having spent 6 years telling her that I loved her. But that's all over now, and all I can do is learn from it, promise to be better, and keep going. So now I'm turning 29 in a week, still living at home with parents, and constantly battling self-loathing and anxiety while working a job for $9.25 an hour. But I'd pay my parents $300 a month to stay with them, and I'm going back to school. Taking the minimum number of credit hours per semester, since I'm paying for it out of pocket, and I work full time and overtime when I can get it, but slowly dragged my GPA from a 1.28 to a 2.64, and can start getting help next semester instead of paying for all of it out of pocket. Now, I also lost a ton of weight during the pandemic and weigh just 189. Now, in rehab I dropped to 220, but I was closer to 245 to 250 before that. Safe to say I won't be worth dating for a long time, but maybe when I get my degree under my belt and finish growing and learning I can get a self-sustaining job I can move out and truly start over. Edit. Hey guys, I'm getting a swath of PMs asking what the number one thing was that helped me through that time, and I'm saying without a single doubt that punk rock did it, and going to punk concerts. This song by my all-time favorite band the Flatliners was my wake-up song and best bud song. Girlfriend helped me realize that if I wanted to try and make my own music it can be short and punchy as long as it's from the heart. You've already come a long way and you should be very proud of what you have accomplished so far. That's a lot to go through, and I'm glad that you are seeing the light at the end of tunnel. I was the person who said no. We had only known each other for 3 months, and he was smitten. I was more cautious. I said no, I like you, but it's way too soon. He asked when would be enough time. I said maybe a year. He proposed again at midnight, 1 year after we first met. I said yes, and we have been together 8 years now. Edit. I know a year was still not a long time, but we had a long engagement and didn't get married for another 5 years. I was expecting this to go down in flames, but ended up making me smile. Thanks a lot. This is the story of my parents. My dad asked my mom to marry him several times. She said no, several times. One day my dad asked my mom to marry him, yet again. She said yes. He freaked out and left her apartment and dumped her. 3 weeks later he hated his life without her and begged her to take him back and marry him. They were married 9 months later for 16 years until my mom passed from cancer. They loved each other so much and had such a deep appreciation for each other. That was 25 years ago. My dad has not remarried. No one will ever come close to my mama. Dad, marry me. Mom no dad, marry me. Mom, no dad, marry me. Mom, yes. Dad, well now I'm not doing it. My mom rejected my father the first 2 times, lol. There was no real hard feelings between them. I guess my mother was just not ready for marriage yet. She ended up proposing to him. My grandmother and mother sewed a suit for their dog to wear and attached a sign around his neck with a ring that read, "Will you marry me?" Then she sent the dog out into the kitchen to beg for scraps while my father was preparing dinner. The next thing she heard was a very concerned voice shouting, "Honey, the dog is asking me to marry him." Cue absolute hysterics. My dad said yes to the proposal. My human dad and my human mom are still married 2 decades later. The fact that I even had to clarify this is severely disappointing. TSK. 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 Edit 1. My parents found the photo. They are just getting it sent, so stay tuned, and I will post the pet tax edit too. My god, you guys are more impatient than kids at an ice cream truck. Here is your pet tax. Haha. AskReddit 3. You're la savage. Give the old good boy a break. Edit 4. I find it humorous that my photo has more views than this thread has upvotes. So I guess I just wanna say hello to all of the lurkers out there. I hope you all have a wonderful morning / day / evening / night. I swear I'm not trying to be passive aggressive. Just realize that it could come across that way. Your dad was preparing dinner and had a great sense of humor. What a catch. My dad proposed to a woman who said no. My dad was a violent alcoholic and she said she couldn't be with him unless he got clean. Took him a little while, but he did it. He wound up meeting my mom through a matchmaker and they've been married 25 years. If that woman never said no to him, he never would have gotten clean. It was the lowest point in his life, but it all brought him to my mom, who makes him happier than ever. My dad talks to her sometimes. She got married to someone else, and they had a son who died from a medical condition. Well, that story went well until the last 6 words. So this actor, Patrick Moot, proposes to his girlfriend at a basketball game and gets turned down while on the giant jumbotron. Clip goes on YouTube, etc, etc. She tells him later that she turned him down because she thinks his rig is too small. So he travels around the world, documenting what other cultures think about penis size and penis enlargement, and made a movie about it called Unhung Hero. I've never watched it, but the title alone makes me laugh. God, I thought that would be a joke. I was a young Marine. I was only home during the weekends. Was dating this girl for about a year from my hometown. When I asked, she said yes. Her dad, former Navy, kept saying we should wait. We put it off for a bit longer. Fast forward another year. She dumped me. Father informs me she has been sleeping with a lot of guys, like more than 50 over the 2 years we dated, and was very happy I didn't marry her, and apologizes to me for her behavior. She then totally ghosting everyone including her family for about 6 months. Find out she moved 7 hours away and was living under a house, not a basement, under a house with her new BF. She calls her mom to come get her. Mother and father ask me to go get her and bring her home. Good times. Good times. Well, did you? Edit. Nothing like some suspense to get my most upvotes ever, aha. Thank you. My mum actually said no to my dad's proposal when they were younger. Not because they weren't in love, but because she wasn't sure if it was something she actually wanted to do, rather than something that society expected of her, or whatever. They still stayed together and had kids, hence why you're reading this now. And then when my dad was terminally ill a few years ago, my mum plucked up the courage and asked him, just to get her back after all those years. He said no, before taking her up on the offer a few days later. He died a happy man. Edit. Holy cheese, I uploaded this before bed and haven't been on Reddit since. Just flicked it on to see all of your lovely responses. Really does mean the world to hear people taking some joy from their story. Thanks so much. For a bit more context on this, it was actually 2 declined proposals, not just one. Both pre-children too, so let's say unlucky. Also, when they did get married, it wasn't purely an action for the estate or whatever. They already had wills etc sorted. It was just one of those last great days as a family. In fact, my sister and I were the only 2 present at the registry office. And when I say office, they literally squeezed us into one of the registrar's offices as there was a big waiting list for weddings and we didn't know how long he had. He died 3 months later, so we were all hugely grateful for them for helping us out like that. I'm so sorry for your loss. That was a beautiful story. Not sure if this count, but I proposed. She said yes, but 1 month before the wedding she took it back. This is what happened immediately with my life. I personally lost about $3,000 worth of deposits. My parents and her parents lost about $4,000 each on deposits. Me and my parents are working class, so it took years for us to financially recover from this. I spent $200 on a ring I didn't want. My biggest regret, and will say this anyone who listens, the engagement ring chain I bought it from wouldn't take it back. I took it to pawn shops and they'd only offer a few hundred. This engagement ring store bank on customers who wants the whole ring, stone, band, setting. If you're going to buy a ring, just buy the stone or gold band setting. You can get a better deal from a local jewelry store. Apparently my gem I bought was choose. Most of the cost of the ring was BS. Most of my family was from out of state, and a lot of people were pissed because they cancelled their flight. I had to go to the so I didn't leave my room. I couldn't take any calls because everyone was pissed, and I didn't want to hear it. I was depressed and just stayed in bed. One day my roommate grabbed me and took me to the where the doctor treated me for severe dehydration and an infection. What happened when I got over it? I became stronger for it. I didn't propose to anyone until a decade later. Honestly, there wasn't anyone that I didn't love deeply enough to be in a committed relationship. But when I proposed I was in my 30s. A relationship was more mature than my first time I proposed. We are now married for 13 years. She's my best friend. When I have good news, she's the first person I want to tell it to. When I have bad news, she's the first person I want to tell it to. I financially recovered as well. I learned my lesson about the engagement ring. Only paid $300 for it. She loved it and treasures it. After our 10-year milestone we were doing so well. I told her to pick a wedding ring of any cost. She refused. She still wears that cheap $300 ring and loves it. The huge markup on jewelry isn't unique to engagement rings, although it is probably highest with them. I've heard it's normal for a 70-80% profit margin on jewelry in shops. Because of that, some places, especially if not part of a chain, will accept a lower offer for 4-figure prices. So try your luck, just not in front of the girlfriend if she's picking her own. Don't expect 70% off, but depending on the margin of the specific item and how hard it is to find a buyer, you could save a sizable amount. Of course, you could save more money having one custom made. A friend of mine did this and has adamant he saved thousands for one of the same value from a shop. I can't say for sure if he's right, but when you think of the overhead saved, there is certainly logic to it. I spoke to her about it beforehand and she seemed really keen on the idea. So I decided to propose about a week after. In front of all our friends, she was so shocked she picked me up off my knee and shooed me away. Most of our friends were confused because everyone knew it was going to happen, and she said she was excited for it. I didn't know what to do. It was all really embarrassing, and later she explained she didn't mean no, she just didn't know what to say and was scared. She said yes after apologizing profusely, and just this year we celebrated our 9th anniversary. Edit. I'm happy that this comment blew up, but I feel like the next time I tell someone it is an icebreaker they are going to say I read this on Reddit. My dad maintains to this day that my mom never said yes till she said I do. She laughs when she's nervous and never actually said yes, but put the ring on while laughing. He took it as a yes. They will be married 39 years come August. Together 44. In 2017, Google came up with this idea to allow you to make photo books out of your Google Photos account. My girlfriend and I had been dating for almost 2 years and I knew she was the one I wanted to marry, so I created this wonderful photo book of all of our selfies together and ended it with a page made out of a photo I generated that said, "Will you marry me?" I then proceeded to put all these things into an album and build the photo book. What didn't occur to me at the time was that the album I put these in was a shared album and the other person gets a notification when you add new photos to it, and the other person that the album was shared with My girlfriend. That evening, we had dinner and it all came out. She saw the photo. She wasn't ready. There were a few reasons why, but they were good reasons and smart reasons, mostly to do with timing, family, and finances. We weren't breaking up, we just weren't getting engaged at that time. A year later, we have fully discussed the concept of getting married. We went ring shopping. She picked her own ring, and by the time I actually did propose, we both knew what her answer would be. We celebrated our first wedding anniversary in April. It seems to have worked out so far, and the photo book is on a shelf to my left as we speak. I'm a firm believer that the only surprise in a proposal should be how you are proposing, not that you are. She or he should know that it is going to happen at some point, but not know how. Marriage is a big deal and should be discussed extensively beforehand, as it is a huge legal agreement. I'm glad it ended up working out for you. The photo book idea is really sweet. We received a letter from the immigration office saying that she was lacking some documents. At the moment we were stressed, both of us, with work and study, and none of us were sufficiently fluent in German to decipher this kind of language. We went to the university office for foreign students. The lady in charge translated to us the letter badly, telling us that even presenting the documents they would proceed with the deportation process. We panicked. Looking for some more help, we ended in the city hall. With the adrenaline rush, I proposed to her in quite a loud voice. If we get married, could we stop the deportation? I asked the poor guy in the information office. I can't remember if he gave us an answer. I want to marry her. Will you marry me? She started laughing. I started laughing. The guy in the office gave us the telephone to the pertinent department and asked us to call. We went out of the city hall and we couldn't stop laughing. She said to me, "Well, thank you, but let's wait a bit." After the weekend we went to immigration office and the people there explained which documents were missing, how to get them. She wasn't denied the visa, and we kept living in the way we planned. It was intense, and, in retrospective, really funny. Addendum: we are not married, and never planned, but we live together. She got a job that provides her with a visa. Soon she will present herself to citizenship exam. So, did you marry her? My mom told my dad no when he proposed to her, even though they were already living together. She thought he was impotent, and it wasn't until she got pregnant that she said yes. In retrospect, I wish my parents had decided early in their relationship that they can barely stand each other. I think he meant infertile. Impotence is an inability to perform sexual, normally referring to not being able to get/maintain an erection. My husband asked 3 times in the span of a couple months. We had dated for 3 years. He was ready. I wanted to graduate college first. Also, don't propose by handing your a ring while you're both in the car on the way to Burger King. I'm low maintenance, but put some thought into it. My ex-husband didn't get the chance to propose. He had been keeping the ring hidden at his mom and dad's house. We were on our way out to dinner at a nice restaurant and we stopped at their house on the way there. I thought we were just there to say hi. We sat down for a few minutes and he excused himself to go to the bathroom. His mom followed him out of the room and returned a few moments later with him at her heels, tossed the ring box into my lap, and said, "I guess this is yours." I was ducking shocked. We had just found out I was pregnant, and he had been planning to propose at Christmas, but decided to do it early. His mother didn't like me, and she's definitely at least one of the things we divorced over. Oh, I have a story about this. My friend A had been with his girlfriend B for years, so he decided he wanted to propose. What he didn't know is that B was also thinking about proposing to him. A proposed first, and B freaked out because she had already set her proposal and bought a ring, so she said no. Over the next week, B freaked out more and more and refused to answer A's calls and messages. A then decided to use the money he had saved up to buy a plane ticket to Europe. What was supposed to be a 3-month trip through Western Europe turned out to be a year-long trip around the world. One day, A says that he's coming back, and B decides to go and wait for him at the airport and propose to him there. It turns out that, while being in Peru, A met a girl and they fell in love almost immediately and got married in Peru. 5 years later, R and his Peruvian wife are still happily married and recently had a baby, while B hasn't still quite forgiven herself for ruining her relationship with A. I don't understand why B would say no if that was what she wanted to. Not my story, but someone I'm friends with. They both had chisty homes and became a couple at 14. Somewhere around 20 he proposed to her. She said she wasn't ready to commit yet. After that he'd propose to her every year partially in hopes she would be ready, but it was also kind of a ritual where he would show her that he's still serious. She would say no every time. In their late 20s he was done with his studies. She could see the finish line, so she told him she's ready, meaning marriage and eventually children. That's when he gets second thoughts about marrying the only woman he ever had a relationship with, and he wasn't sure if he was making a mistake. They went on a break. She went to the US from Europe to do her PhD at the MIT. They drifted apart more. She moved on and found a new long-term relationship with a partner that's a lot better for her, while he quickly regretted ending the relationship and started ducking whoever he could find on Tinder without being able to form a meaningful relationship after. That turned dark real quick. We'd been dating for a year and a half, and I was due to move out on orders, was in the army. She suggests we get married. I said no way. I was going off to school, army type, for 6 months, then a year on a deployment to the Middle East. It just wouldn't work. She was calm, and then said, you think I'll be a burden to all of that, but I'll actually be a help. While just seconds earlier all I could think of was what a pain in the ear it would be to get married and leave, and now it, for whatever reason, seemed perfectly reasonable that she was right. We got married a week later at the courthouse. I was 22. Last month we had a nice socially distant dinner party for our 29th anniversary with our 2 amazing kids and a few friends. She was right lol. And good job. Said no, we broke up, got back together, got a job in Alaska for the summer, and forgot to tell me. Then we don't talk for years. There was a shooting at my church. She calls me out of the blue to make sure I'm okay. After an awkward pause, well, I want to make sure you didn't do something stupid like go after the shooter. Then she hung up. But here is a good story. I was 20 and she was 18. We had been really close friends for years. We were in that awkward should we date or shouldn't we phase. So we went out to dinner. She told me, you realize if we go this route, we are getting married in a couple of years. So we talked about what we really wanted out of life. She wanted to be a pastor's wife. I believe God loves stupid people cause he made so many. We realized we both wanted different things from life. Been friends for 20 years. Had a rough patch when she got married, and the guy couldn't comprehend why I would be that close to her and not want to marry her. But now everything is good. Edit. 2 girls, 2 stories, 1 cup. Is it just me, or does anyone find the timelines in this story confusing as hell? We met in her home country of Germany while I was traveling. I knew I was in love. We dated long distance for a while, me flying to Europe, her flying to the US. I suggested marriage so we could be together. She said no a few times. I didn't press, but I was patient and not being pushy. I knew she was worth the wait. Then it hit her, that's how we could be together. If we got married, we could live in a country together. The difficulties of being born on a different patch of dirt. A few years later, I'm still married to my best friend and living with her in Germany. Not all no's stay no. Life goes on. Not all no's stay no, and therefore, Your Honor, I was proposed to several times by men when I was living in the Middle East. I think they just went and found the next American girl to propose to. May I ask, where were you in the Middle East? I'm a Middle Eastern. About 2 years later I met my wife of 22 years. We are happily married. The one who said no got married for the first time last year and seems happy. My wife is way into me in ways that the former girlfriend never was, and I see my life as far happier with my wife than I ever was with the one who said no. She's not a bad person. I was just young and in love with someone who wasn't in love with me. It worked out for the best. I'm glad she said no. Dim sum, but especially chun fan. It's my favorite dim sum dish. It's just shrimp wrapped in rice noodle with a sweet dipping sauce. But oh my god, is it delicious. Dim sum is generally pretty inexpensive and there's so many dumpling options to choose from. I love this comment. Not me but a guy I knew proposed to his then girlfriend in a restaurant, made sure to have a friend record it. She walked out when he popped the question and pretty much ghosted him. He started drinking, found a new pain in gambling, and gambled all his savings away. He ended up living on money of the state, works a garbage picker job now and almost set his house on fire at least 4 times that I know of by making food and falling asleep drunk. He was an interesting guy, friendly to some, but the state has him is just sad. Hope at some point he picks up his life again. Haven't heard of him in years though, so no idea where he is now. Thanks for thinking about me. I'm right here, in Vegas, in a very off license, off the strip casino about to bet my scrotum on this game of Texas Hold'em I found. Can't lose. We actually got married, moved in together. 2 weeks later, she moves out, blocks me everywhere, and never gave me a reason. Shortly after I was served with papers. Now I'm divorced. That was last summer, and not sure where I'm now. Making work my main priority for now. I just want to know why for some closure, but that's too far gone now. My mother told my father no 3 times. On the 3rd time he got wasted at a local bar and basically started pouring his heart out to anyone who'd listen. Mind you, it's a very small village in the Italian Alps and my father barely spoke Italian and no one in the village spoke English, including my mother. Word got back to my mom about this sad American at the bar, so she went to find him, and she told him she'd marry him. My parents celebrated their 44th anniversary last month. This sounds like a genuinely romantic movie. It was absolutely horrible at first. I legit thought my life was ending as shortly after that she wanted to take a break. Pretty much she wanted to date her co-worker at Baker Square and had a really weird cult-ish relationship with all her co-workers. At first I was confused/upset, all of the above. But weirdly enough one of her friends/acquaintance for me contacted me since she knew I was in a rough patch. Completely innocently, and we hung out, and she even knew that I wanted to get back together with her at some point, so it wasn't anything immediate. Eventually, the girl I proposed to found out her co-worker boy toy was a douche and wanted to get back together with me, and obviously I had been fretting about it for like 3 months, so I instantly said yes, even though unknowingly I started forming a bond with her friend/my acquaintance. Slowly, things just started deteriorating as I started getting honestly kind of suspicious that she wanted to get together with one of her other co-workers, and surprisingly I was actually right. She ending up breaking up with me again, and I thought I was gonna go through it all again, but this time the shock only lasted a few days, since this time I kind of had closure. Meanwhile, somehow I think the friend/my acquaintance/current girlfriend of 4 years knew that this was gonna happen and was there for me when I needed it. Like both times for me, it was super rough, couldn't even function. Got together, and honestly I can't even understand how I thought I was happy with my old girlfriend who I proposed to. I even look back, and I'm realizing that even her family was ducked up. Her mom was extremely controlling, and even, disgustingly, bragged about how she dated a boy in high school for a few years, and broke up with him, and hurt his feelings so bad that he moved for mental health reasons. Like, I guess the apple didn't fall far from the tree. To be quite honest though, I miss her dad a lot. Like honestly, he messages me every once in a while. I doubt his daughter knows, and basically I can just hear it in his voice that he would rather her date me than her new boyfriend, since I had a pretty good bond with him. Even so, I still don't like to message back with anything too much, since I'd somehow weirdly feel like it's cheating on my current girlfriend who has the most chill parents I've ever met and are super easygoing. I honestly think my life would have been hell if I chose to marry my past girlfriend with a mom-in-law problem. Anyways, that's my story. Thanks for reading. Feel free to message your ex's father. He's a friend who happens to be related to your ex. Tell your girl. She'll understand. Don't let friendships fall apart. Deleted. Glad that ended the way it did. She said, "Who the duck are you? Get out of my house." Well, it's not a no. I proposed to my husband several times before he did. I know this question was specifically targeting hetero males, but this applies. He stated he wanted to marry me, but not right away. We were together almost 5 years before he said yes. I wasn't going to give up on this man. That's really sweet. I wasn't going to give up on this man. Depression and suicide attempt 10 times. We both really liked each other until I heard slot of text messages from a stranger saying, "When do you want to meet up next day?" I proposed and she said no. "I've already got someone else." She walked away and I've never been the same person. Just because someone burned you doesn't mean you deserve to be on fire. Sometimes it just means you got touched by the wrong person. I feel you, man. Take care. All I know was that I was in kindergarten or Mayo. My kindergarten crush said yes, and then a teacher made fun of us, and then I don't think we talked again. It had been 5 years. Things had gotten a bit rocky. We've both worked the same incredibly time-demanding job, and it had kept us apart, despite living together, for the better part of 2 years. The promise of a 6-figure salary made it hard to let go of and do the right thing, and I proposed in a last-ditch effort to save the relationship. I'll never forget that moment. At that moment she looked at me, roses on the floor, ring in hand, and with cold eyes, filled with sadness and a sprinkle of pity, just said no. She left for a cow walker that I had hired a year before, a man 20 years older than either of us, and as a person I shattered. Up until this point society, family, friends had all reinforced that I was living life the way it should be lived. Financial security, wealth above my needs, a long-term relationship, hell, we were getting a house. In an instant all that came crashing down around me. What followed after was the single most devastating time of my life. I couldn't work, they were there. I tried but got pulled off the job. Never happens on the railroad. They will literally work you to death by another supervisor and sent to get checked at the hospital. They took me off on stress leave. Within a month I had stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped doing literally anything. Didn't answer the phone. Just laid there on the couch with Netflix endlessly streaming. I don't even know what. Eventually some friends who hadn't seen or heard from me in some time came to check on me. I must have been in rough shape. Half the house was destroyed. My hands were just a bleeding mess from smashing things. I think there were still bits of that lovely Ikea particle board stuck in my knuckles here and there. They took me to a hospital. Intake upgraded me to critical care. That was full, so I had to stay the night in a secure waiting room. The next day a doctor met with me, asked me some questions. He said, "In the 13 years I've worked here, you're the most suicidal person I've ever met. I'm honestly surprised you're alive." Will never forget that. I'd never even thought of myself as a suicidal person before. I couldn't help but think dying would be easier than living through what I was feeling. They put me in a psych ward for 3 months. No outside privileges, a merry-go-round of different medications to try and help change my mood. I had no contact with the outside. I wanted it that way. I shut down social media and shut off the phone. I didn't want the friends and family who were so proud of me to see what I had become, a miserable hollow shadow of my former self. The only person I called was her. I asked her to come get me. She never came. It's hard to say what happened next. Eventually the friends who had taken me to the hospital were allowed to see me and visited from time to time. I don't remember moving out of my house. I don't remember what happened to all of my belongings. I don't remember being 28 years old. I have a picture of a birthday somewhere, but no recollection of it. I spent the next year on a lot of prescription drugs that destroyed my memory. Eventually one day I woke up in a bed, in a strange room, in a strange house. I walked out the door to a dining room, where there were no less than 7 Bibles on the table. It scared me. I had no idea where I was. There were keys to a truck parked outside on the table in my bedroom next to what was certainly my computer. A woman stopped by, nursing student, beautiful, talented, caring. She was there to see me, and to my surprise we were dating. Had been for a time it would seem. But that was strange for me. I had known her before all of this, but never in this context, and the relationship felt weird and unnatural. The medication had run out, and I was coming out of it, starting to be more present again. Apparently the friend who brought me to the hospital was there when I was discharged and took me with him to his church. I had no place to live, and they set me up with one of their members and had paid 2 months rent for me to stay there. I've never been religious like that in my adult life, and this was strange to me, but at least I wasn't homeless. I just woke up one day with a new life and had to accept that that was the case. And so, like Mario, I started the game over again. I would go on to help the same friend who took me to the hospital through his divorce and to buy a house that we both lived in. The girl and I amicably parted ways a few months later. I started volunteering and went back to school. Officially resigned from the railroad. Some of the people I left behind when I cut all ties with that relationship I still haven't spoken to again since that day. Now I'm sitting here, 6 years later, attempting to create podcasts where people have a safe space in their lives to talk about their struggles and reduce the stigma surrounding them, and launching a Facebook group and YouTube channel aimed at helping people achieve holistic wellness and self-discovery. That's the whole story, and probably the first time I've shared it. Edit. This got way more attention than I was expecting. I'm going to attempt to answer the questions below. I've never received so many, so I'll do my best. Thank you for your support and the silver and hugs, but most importantly for listening. Sometimes it's very strange to think you've gone through something so unbelievable in your life. Holy chiz, that sounds like something out of a movie. He didn't ask again, and I had to ask him instead. We married last year. Understandable why he didn't ask again. Glad you took the affirmative step to show you were ready to make that commitment instead of silently pondering and getting upset that he didn't ask you a second time. My mom and dad were not married and wanted a kid and had me. My dad, being Catholic and Hispanic, decided he wanted to be married to my mom and proposed. She said no because she hadn't been divorced from her first husband for very long and now had 3 young kids and preferred to stay not married. He threatened to leave her and got on his motorcycle and started to drive away until my mom chased him down and gave in, leading to what my parents call a voodoo wedding the same day. I'm going to need more details about the voodoo wedding if you have them. As a woman who was engaged and the proposal was later revoked, it still stings a little 11 years later. When you're sure you're with the love of your life, losing them can really pop a hole in your life plans. When did you start to feel better? It's been 7 months, and I still can't believe we're not getting married. I miss him and our dog and our house every day, but according to him, he ruined everything and doesn't want me back because our relationship will always be damaged. I feel like I've died. I was in a relationship with her for 5 years, living together for 1. She had an infant daughter from a previous relationship with a drug addict who popped up occasionally. We moved together because her mother stole her rent money for months. I was feeling depressed and lost my job. I was diagnosed with clinical depression later when I sought help. I told her I wanted to move back to my parents' house as I was going mad. She said if I did, it would be all over between us. I moved, and a week later, I tried to reach her and she had started a relationship with a biker she met while we were together. I went to her house and proposed, got rejected. She had a hickey. It's been 5 years. She now has 2 more children. I started treatment for my depression. 3 more months to complete, moved to another city, and had a substantial boost on my salary. I'm feeling better than in the last 15 years. I asked a woman after almost 6 years together. She said no, and added that maybe it was time for us to go our separate ways. Wow. Shock. But life has to go on. About a year later I met a different girl and we were engaged within a year. We were both ready for marriage. That was 16 years ago. We've got 3 terrific kids, 2 boys that are exceptional athletes and a girl who's a brainy little nerd. The lady who refused me eventually got married, had a couple kids, and got divorced. But she got married again, and had another kid, and got divorced again. We completely lost touch several years ago. She was an art major, and I had just joined the army. We had been lovers since high school. I asked, she said no. She wanted to get her master's. We were friends for a while, but we don't talk anymore. She works as a bartender I think now. I ended up getting married to my best friend. We've been married for more than a decade, and have a 5-year-old son. She was in trauma from a past relationship, and at that time I wanted to help her move on. And in that act I realized that I've fallen in love with her, as she's the one who, despite being in depression, helped me out of my social anxiety. I just couldn't see her suffer, so I proposed to her and got rejected as she wasn't ready to be in another relationship, and since I confessed about love, she got more anxious and our friendship was temporarily over. We didn't talk or have contact for months. Later on, I somehow contacted her. We had a bit of talk and asked how she was doing and learned that she has been shutting herself in her room, minimizing contact with people. I still had romantic feelings for her, but I wanted to be with her and help her move on, so I insisted being friends again. We spent our time like that, and honestly she's the only friend I had. Time passed, and when I saw she's getting back to her normal life, I proposed her again, and she accepted. It was a long way to that day. I've never been happier in my life. It's been 4 years since then, though we have arguments due to different views, but we always come up with a solution to resolve things. And I can say this with certainty, that nobody can love me the way she does. I feel lucky to have her in my life. I started reading this thread expecting to feel sad, but instead ended up feeling joyful after reading so many wholesome stories. We were dating for a little over a year, but I was so sure she was the one. I drove 2 hours to see her at her college and went on a beautiful winter night walk and proposed. She looks me right in the eyes and said, "Oh, you thought this was serious?" Well, I don't know how to say this other than I have been saying other people. Well, actually I have been seeing other women. I was stunned. I got up, put the ring in my pocket, and walked to my car, got in, and drove away, never looking back, crying the whole time. Haven't seen or spoken with her in 7 years, even though she has tried countless times to reach out. Now it's a story I tell friends who are nervous about asking their significant others to marry them, reminding them that, even if they say no, it could be worse. I can't decide if telling them the story is a really good or really bad idea. I asked again. 7 times. She finally said yes, so long as I agreed to feed her. She was pregnant and hungry. Well, did you feed her, or did she starve? I was the one who said no. We were high school sweethearts, had actually known each other since 1st grade, and despite me moving to a different city, we reconnected in high school. I followed him out to college, and realized there was a whole other world out there besides the small towns I grew up in. He already had our entire life planned out, and it wasn't until we had dated 3.5 years and he surprised me with a ring and a proposal that I realized he wasn't what I wanted at all. He was lazy, never went to class, didn't stand up for himself, and was codependent. I said no. He then proceeded to literally stalk me. We lived in the same apartment complex, but different units. He would knock on my door all hours of the day. I never answered. He would call and text constantly. This was before you could block numbers on an iPhone. He attempted to break into my roommate's window and was successful because she had left it unlocked. I wasn't at the apartment, and he told her I was just trying to get some stuff. The very rare occasions I would open the door, very shortly after our breakup, he would force his way in or stick his boot in between the door, so I couldn't close it. I called the cops numerous times, but they never did anything. He would follow me if I left places. At one point, he somehow knew information that I knew he couldn't have known, and found out he had somehow installed a program onto my computer to track all my passwords and keystrokes and activity. That was when I decided to change my phone number. He would leave stuff on our balcony, letters, gifts, random cheers. He did not stop and would threaten me often by saying he would find out my new phone number. Eventually, it did get less and less. However, to this day, I still hear from him. I'm married now for almost 4 years, and I've heard that he is also married and has a kid on the way. But a few months ago, he found my extremely obscure Facebook. It's not even my full name. It's half my first name and only my middle name. I have maybe 11 friends on there that he has no connection with. I really only use this FB to be in groups to discuss true crime and ask me to meet up with him for lunch for closure. I blocked him, but I know I'll hear from him again somehow in a few months. It's ridiculous, honestly. I regret ever dating the guy. Hoo boy, this guy is stalking long term. Bad sign, as you know from your true crime interest. Stalking is now a crime in many places, not all. Please document everything. Find out about stalking laws in your area. Domestic abuse clinics often know a lot about this. If has reading this now, dude, you are the bad guy here, even though it may feel like you're the victim. SSDGM. I never saw her again. Less than a year later I met my wife. We've been together 15 years. Yes, finally one of these that I can relate to. We met through family and I asked her to marry me, made a romantic video and asked. She said she would think about it, ignored me for 2 weeks, and then said she thought about it, and that she just didn't feel ready, but wanted to be friends afterwards. Now here is the crazy part. For the longest part she was the one driving me crazy with marriage. SOOO happy we never got married. I didn't get to hear her say no. Here's the story. I was with my ex-girlfriend for about 6 years. We had a lot of ups and downs, but ultimately we were always able to talk and work things out. Our relationship was not bad to say the least, and I felt like the more time passed the better it was getting. We had sort of similar mindsets, but we did disagreed on certain things. However, we did connect a lot in many hobbies, ideas, and I felt like we were both in the same frequency for the most part. By November of last year I really felt like our relationship was really good and there were no problems. There came a point where she had an opportunity to go work in Japan like she once did at a certain point in our relationship. However, she said that she does not want to go live alone again and would rather go if I can go live with her, because the first time she did it, I could not live with her since we were not married, and that caused her to have a lot of depression and loneliness. For me to live with her in Japan, even if I don't work for her company, I would have to be married to her, or else the Japanese government basically says no, you can't live here. I started thinking a lot about marriage and how we've been dating for so long, and she always bothered me about how I have to propose to her since she asked me out when we started dating. So I did what I thought was best, and I decided to ask her hand in marriage, or at least attempt, since we were dating for so long. And I really thought I was going to be with her for the rest of my life. I asked multiple family and friends about rings, where to buy, who can make custom rings, what materials, everything. At this point it was December and we were approaching Christmas Day, so I planned on proposing to her on Christmas Day, because both of our favorite holiday was Christmas, because of how much joy it brings, and how it makes people come together. I asked for her ring size discreetly, because I never really had that information. I went on ahead and looked for someone that made custom rings. I went and asked the man to make me a replica of the ring that Howell wears from the Ghibli movie Howl's Moving Castle, because her favorite movie of all time was Howl's Moving Castle, and I wanted to show her how much thought I put into the ring, and I knew that she would wear it for as long as she can. I got the ring. It was perfect, made out of pure silver. She wasn't one to want very fancy things, so she didn't care much about price value, but more about the thought that goes into it. And also I didn't have much money, but the ring was stunning nonetheless. 3 days before Christmas we had an event at a friend's house where it was a mini Christmas get together with the friend group. We went to the event, had a good time, but it was time to go home. We decided to stop by a Wendy's, since we were both hungry, and something came up where we essentially had a sort of argument and disagreement. It was a big disagreement that affected the relationship and our current status, so at the end of the argument, mind you I was not sober, I essentially said, if this is what you want then I think it's best if you find someone else. She replied with, is that what you really think? To which I sort of let out a big sigh and was about to explain to her my thoughts, but ultimately she essentially said okay. She started talking about how she's been watching my actions and how I treat her and what everyone has been telling her on how I treat her, and that the past few months I haven't given her respect she needed. How for every good thing I did, it would be overshadowed by the bad things I would do right after. She didn't want to pretend like things were okay anymore, and proceeded to tell me how unhappy she was for the past few months, and how she had a sudden waking up moment the past few days, that she deserves better. She apologized for the bad timing of her sudden realization, and told me how her choice was influenced with the fact that she felt like I was going to propose, and proceeded to say that if I was going to she will feel really bad because she just ended the relationship, which I just simply replied with, well, you didn't know so it's not your fault. We were both crying at that point, but it was time for me to get out of the car because we were at my house and you can only talk about it so much for one night on something that was not going to change. I was living in complete ignorance for the past few months. I thought everything was fine, but obviously it wasn't. I wasn't aware of my actions towards her or even towards all my friends. I was not being mindful of a lot of things when I should have been. Overall, that whole experience was a big lesson for me. It was a lesson that taught me to be more mindful about my actions, to listen to my emotions more, and to be more self-aware of how I'm acting towards others, especially towards the person that I declared my partner. I loved her immensely. If I didn't, I wouldn't have gone through the lengths I did to even find a guy that was willing to do my request for the ring, or for everything else I have done for her over the years. She loved me a lot too, but one person can only tolerate so much after a while. I brought her down many times when I should encouraged her. In a way, I was her biggest hater when I should have been her #1 fan. She grew a lot over the years while I stayed behind without changing for the better. I'm glad she had that sudden realization. I'm glad things ended because it helped me grow as a person for these past 7 months. It was very hard at first, but I'm doing better than I did before. To be honest, our relationship should have ended 3 years earlier, but we kept fighting for it. When I look back at it, I realize how we were not as compatible and how we had many arguments and disagreements. I held her back in many places, just like she held me back in others. We don't hate each other. We actually care for each other very much, but it was obvious that it was better if we were just friends. Again, I'm very glad this happened. I've been able to grow and focus on myself to be a better person, and she as well has been able to grow even more. The moral of the story is stay true to yourself. Focus on what makes you happy without the need of someone else. Be mindful about your actions and listen to your emotions. And if you really care about the other person, sometimes it's necessary to make the tough decision, but know that in the end it's best for both parties. It will get better. Edit. Wow. Thank you strangers for the gold and silver. This is the first time I ever received these things. I also want to thank everyone for reading the post and for the people that have shared experiences and thoughts. I made some grammar corrections to make it seem like I'm not rambling for some sentences. I tried my best to write this post, since English is not my first language. Here's some pictures of the ring, since someone requested to see it. Imga. Damn. It takes a very strong man to realize they were wrong. You've clearly made a ton of progress. I'm proud of you. Keep it up. I tried again. Actually, the first time was a joke. The second time was not. We broke up as we wanted different things and some things happened that messed us up a bit. We are getting married for legal reasons due to current medical problems, because I don't want my family to be able to interfere. We are already basically considered married in my country due to de facto laws, but we just want this so everything is as airtight as it can be. Not exactly the same thing, but I told my now wife the second day we were talking that I was going to marry her. Her response was, "I'll never get married again." We dated 6 months-ish, then she dumped me seemingly out of nowhere. We were broken up nearly 6 months before I unblocked her number and unblocked her on social media. When we met up again in person, I gave her the biggest hug and kiss and just couldn't believe she was back. After tons of long talks and building our relationship back and way stronger, we got engaged. I married the duck out of her and now we're happier and stronger than ever. I'm so glad it worked out this way. I love her more than I thought possible. I'm a lucky dude. This is super sweet. So you blocked her first. Who reached out to whom? I need details. Lol. Lol, I asked my wife. She knew it was coming. Got down on one knee. She said no. I blanched. She said just kidding, I swear it. We've been married 22 years last April. Every once in a while, just for fun, I bring it up, and she always apologizes. Lol. I'm a lady, but proposed and got rejected by my ex of 5 years. We started dating at 16 to 17y/o and dates for 5 years. I decided I was ready to take our relationship to the next step, and since we discussed marriage possibilities a lot beforehand, I knew he wanted for me to propose and that he wanted to get married with me. So I planned the perfect way to ask him to marry me. Bought the rings, planned and paid for a 2 days kayak and camping trip so that the two of us would be alone. We rented some camping gear and went on our merry way. After setting our tent and having dinner at the end of the first day, I decided to pop the question in front of the campfire. The first thing he asked me is if I was joking. I said no. He asked if I was for real. I said yes. Then said that he wasn't ready for this kind of things. That he was just a kid. I cried a lot. He didn't even want to see the rings I chose for us. We had an awkward end of our trip, then went back home. We were together for a year after that, but things were different. The fact that he rejected me made me more aware that he was, in fact, still a kid. And I didn't want that at this stage of my life. So I ended the relationship. I've been single for almost a year now, and I honestly feel better. I grew so much as a person in that year, and I'm happy he found someone else who is more to his pace. Well, she said yes but no. Met her online and we really hit it off. She was just amazing. We only knew each other for a month before she moved in with me, and it was just magical. Proposed just after a year together. She had a genetic disorder, and it made her heart swollen. Familial dilated cardiomyopathy, and it was pretty bad. You could see her heart pushing out in between her ribs. She didn't want to get married, because then we wouldn't be able to afford her checkups and medication. She was constantly quite weak, but still full of life. She took naps very often, and one day she just didn't wake up. I cried for days, and was heartbroken for a couple years. I still think of her quite often, and visit her grave whenever I visit home, since it is 1,000 miles away now. I know I filled the end of her life with happiness, as she told me very often. Just feel guilty sometimes. What a beautiful story. You're a good man. We had been dating about 6 weeks. I just knew she was the one. She said, "You're a great guy and I love you, but I'm not ready to get married." We continued dating. I asked again a week or so later. Similar response. Lather, rinse, repeat. I asked 4 more times over the next few weeks. Finally we were at a Chinese restaurant. Fortune cookies come. Mine says, "Your wish is within reach." Ask once more. Hers says, "Get your hope chest ready." No bullshit. No setup. Totally random cookies from the restaurant. I reached across the table, took her hand, and asked for the 7th time. She didn't really say yes. More like a sigh and a resigned okay. First date, December 12th, 1981. Married, April 3rd, 1982. Still together. 1 son, 2 granddaughters, 2 great-granddaughters. Still giddily in love. Never give up. Never surrender. Edit. Thanks for the silver mysterious benefactor. Mine is a little different. Mine said that she wasn't ready yet and asked me to wait and be patient with her. It helped that knew she had some issues with commitment and change, so I played the long game and waited her to make a decision. It took 3 years and the birth of our daughter for her to come up to me one day and say that getting married was interesting to her. 1 more kid and 21 years later we are still happily married. Didn't even get to ask. She broke up with me a few weeks after I bought the ring. She told me that she fell out of love with me and that she just wasn't happy with me anymore. We had been fighting a little bit because we were all cooped up during quarantine, but nothing too serious. I figured once everything started opening up and we could go do stuff that we'd both chill out. Well, instead my GF of 5 years decided to leave me. Then 1 week later she started dating another guy. She then told me she had feeling for that guy before we broke up, but that there was no overlap. I was devastated, of course. Returned the ring and was very upset with her. She was my best friend for 15 years. I had known her since kindergarten. I was so mad and said some things that I regret, and I ended up begging for her forgiveness. Even though I was upset with her for leaving me, I couldn't go on without her at least being my friend. So one day we talked, and I apologized and wished her well, and told her I just want her to be happy. I miss her like crazy, but it's her life, and she deserves to be happy. All of this happened last month. Holy cheese, that sucks. I hope you can recover from this, and be really happy. I asked and she said no, because I drank way too much. I said I would get it under control. I tried bluffing and hiding it, but after 3 years it was still a big problem. Joke's on her though, we are still married. Username checks out. Deleted. You're not going to like hearing this, but you wouldn't have been happy together. You would have become the quick and easy scapegoat for her problems, saying that it was your fault she strayed, can't see her kid, doesn't have any money, etc. Inevitably, she would have cheated and taken you for all you're worth. And if you did marry her before she found her husband, she would have cheated on you with someone like him. Let me give y'all some advice from someone who's been indirectly a part of many proposals. I own a gem, mostly diamond, manufacturing corporation and have a high-end retail subsidiary. Although I have been helping out Redditors for a few years now, the question of whether or not you two are getting married is not the surprise. You should discuss marriage and life building with your in detail your timelines, your big picture goals, career aspirations, children, where you want to live/move, idealistic family dynamics, and so on. What can you make a surprise? The actual proposal itself is a surprise. The how, where, when, with what, with whom around, and so on. The nuances. Are you going to do it while hiking Everest to symbolize a long journey together, or are you just going to pop the question in bed because you're la chill? Even for the proposal, I would say get some general insight. Does she want you to do it on front of her 40-person family at a reunion or Thanksgiving, or would she rather do it in private? As for the engagement ring, please try to have your be part of the engagement ring design process. They are the ones who will be, hopefully, wearing it for life. Make sure it's what they wanted. I generally recommend going ring shopping together. That way there's no goose walk, even with a lesser detail like the ring finger size. Edit. If anyone wants to learn about diamond values for natural whites, natural fancy colored ones, and lab grown ones, natural white diamond, and really just gem grade diamonds in general. https natural fancy colored diamonds, lab grown diamonds, and some info on their certifications. More in-depth info on the diamond industry, supply chain, ethics, mining stats. A lot of the shadiness and price gauging occurs at the retail value, which happens to be the point in the supply chain that affects the end consumers the most. Not me, but my teacher proposed to another techer in the middle of all their colleges, and she said no on that day. All his lessons were just silence and the techer just sitting in front of the class doing nothing. Everyone in the whole school knew it. Sounds like a terrible idea in the first place. Not quite what you asked, but my girlfriend at one time, 5 or 6 years ago, screamed at me during an argument, "I'll never marry you," to which I responded, "You don't hear me asking." We got married this past January. Sounds like chemistry. Congratulations. My fiancé proposed at the end of May. He was met with an ooh of disbelief. But then I said yes, after I got over the shock. Together for 7 years so far and hopefully many more yet. Lol. This is kinda how it went down for a couple of my friends too. He's jokingly proposed to her before, and when he was finally serious about it, she told him no cause she thought it was just another joke. When she realized he was serious, she broke down crying. Happy tears, of course. They plan on getting married this summer, if I remember correctly. She lived in my apartment, didn't pay rent or utilities. My doorman escorted her to get her things and didn't let her back in. I have to use my throwaway BC. This might dox me, but my dad asked my mom to marry him several times, and she kept saying no. She had been engaged before, and it was a disaster relationship, and she had decided she was never going to get married. But her and my dad stayed together. Finally, one day my dad says, "Sit down, we need to find a day that works, where both our families can be in town for our wedding." And she was like, "Okay." And they got married. She loves that story, but he just rolls his eyes and goes, "Your mother is so difficult." They've been together for 32 years. Edit, put 22 instead of 32. My mother told my girlfriend not to marry me, for her sake. We've been married 48 years and retired now. Doing well. Married her anyways, lol. Edit, this is actually a joke. I'm very lonely. Oof. She proposed and I said yes. I doubt that you're old enough for that, given your general grammar and mentions of still being in school. It was a second grade and the girl's name was Christina, and she was in my class. I asked her if she would marry me and she said no. I did the only reasonable thing. I told the teacher on her. My dad kept trying and was eventually successful when he stopped using onion rings. I'm someone who said no. I was dating a guy for 6 years, 4 of them long distance, while we were at university, but we had both graduated and I'd come home to do a master's at a university close to my home city. He'd graduated in law, and here in Scotland you need to work for a year as a sort of trainee lawyer while sorting exams for a year after you get your degree to be an actual lawyer. It's kind of like parling the bar, I guess. So anyway, I found out he'd been cheating for at least a year with a girl we knew from high school and had been waiting for him to come clean when this happened. So I obviously told him no. He got his degree clarified and he didn't do well enough to get a trainee post. I finished my master's but didn't particularly like it and changed careers more than once. Thanks financial crash. We are both married to other people now and don't cross paths at all, except one day I was in a pub/restaurant with my husband and in-laws and the girl he was cheating with was our server. That last line. People who surprise their partners with engagements. Why do you think it's okay to force someone to make a major, life-changing legal decision on an emotionally stressful snap decision? No proposal should be a surprise. You discuss marriage as a couple and eventually both agree that you want it. Then, one day, one of you then surprises the other with a proposal. You know it will be a yes because you spoke about it like adults. A man 18 years my senior who was also my boss at the time and the VP of the company we both worked for proposed to me when I was 23 years old after a giant showy dinner and checking in at a hotel I couldn't have even imagined. A decade later, he is now my ex-husband and in a relationship with our babysitter, who is /30 years younger than him. That is the sort of person who surprises someone with a proposal. After about a year I proposed to a beautiful woman with a beautiful 4-year daughter. Her brother and I were firefighters together, and he set me up. She quickly said yes. I then asked her daughter if I could be her stepdad, and she said yes. I should have realized something was off when she wanted to wait and tell her family. We waited for 2 months and then she broke it off. Her brother knew about the proposal and couldn't figure it out either. Come to find out she was secretly seeing another guy. Her family and her daughter were upset with her. Saw the daughter about 6 years later with her uncle and she said that her mom made a big mistake leaving me. She wished I was her stepdad. Oh my, you watched until the end? That's fucking awesome, dude. Thanks for watching.